So the title is slightly different, but we're going to be looking at estimating en-primeur prices, release prices, using weather, market, and tasting reviews for Bordeaux wines. This is a joint work with Hakan Hekimoglu, former PhD student, now a colleague at RPI, and myself. So let's make it clear. Right? We all enjoy that, right? So it's work, right? So, all right. So what's fine wine? I'll go through this very quickly so that it's not painful, right? So a 15 vintage wine. Grapes are harvested in 15 September. And we offer these futures contracts starting around May of 2016. So I'm interested in that price. And they typically get bottled around a year later or so. But I'm interested particularly for this because a couple of years ago I presented a work that was related with Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits, the largest wine distributor in the world, as well as the United States. This is Stephen Becker, and he was asking me, well, you know, I don't want to put money into these futures because I don't know what I'm going to get, and I can't really budget for it without really making a good estimate on that. So we started with that question. We helped them in several different projects, but this is basically looking at what that price should be and what it will be and so on. So Liv-ex puts out a lot of these surveys. They survey around 140 wine merchants around the world, and for 2015 release wines, merchants came up with an average of these different numbers, and the basket value of these expensive wines is around 1,600 or so euros. But it turned out that the release prices were 21% higher in terms of the basket, and different prices obviously that you see. And if you look at 15 versus 14, how they changed from the previous year, this was their prediction, this was the actual, and as you see, it was 46% or so different than what they predicted. Why is that the case? So we try to actually explain this and see whether we can actually get much more accurate information for at least the buyers of these expensive wines. There's an enormous literature on this. Many of you are here. I know Philip, Carl, and others have done phenomenal work that established the foundation for our work. So I'm going to skip that because of time. What do we need? We need a price estimation model for en-primeur wines. So that's the part that I'm interested in. So here's the empirical analysis. This is our team. Most of them are working at Liv-ex, except Hakan and me. So we actually spent quite a bit of time there in March and April. And this is my account. I don't trade, but I have an account and I observe a lot of the trades. And this is the list from the Bordeaux 500 index. So these are top 50 winemakers that is established by Liv-ex. We use 39 of them primarily because we have 5 Sauternes. It's a slightly different process. And 6 are missing data. So that's what we have. And we're looking at vintages from 2001 to 2016. We added the 17 as well in order to make predictions for the upcoming en-primeur campaign. So here are the percent change in futures prices. If you look at this, 5 and 9 are phenomenal vintages. They are declared that way, and big spikes, right? And a lot of them are following the same kind of behavior from year to year. So we started with this picture, and we said that, okay, how can we explain that kind of behavior? We're going to use 4 variables: temperature, the changes in temperatures, total precipitation, Liv-ex 100 index as the metric indicating the market in this, and finally, barrel tasting scores. And we tested with many different tasting experts, but we're using primarily Parker and Neil Martin in this case. So let me start with the weather impact. So futures of 2000 vintage is going to be coming out in May 2016, or starting from that time period. I actually know exactly what happened in 15, what kind of a weather I saw. And if I compare it, and I know also what the prices were in 2014, And if I compare it with 14, and if it was better than 14, I expect the futures price to go up from 14 to 15. So that's the mentality that I have. And if it was less rain, as you know, more rain is not good, it should also lead to the same kind of analysis. And here is the data for weather as well as precipitation in the left bank versus right bank. I actually have quite granular data for different zip codes, but I'm only using Mérignac for left bank and Saint-Emilion for the right bank. And that's sufficient in the data, or the results do not really improve with more granular information. The market impact is very similar in that sense. So I'm looking at the Liv-ex 100 index. These wines are not in my sample. These are the 100 most sought after wines. And I look at it from May prior to harvesting all the way to March, right before Unprimeur campaign begins, and how that changes. And if that index is moving, then the prices should go up as well. So that's the mentality. And here's the index from year to year, different vintages, all the way from 2002 to 2017. Tasting scores similar. So if it is moving from 92 to 96, we expect an increase. So that's the very similar logic. So what's my model like? So I'm going to regress the changes in future prices and the natural log of those by using 4 different variables. These are the log change in average temperature, and I'm looking at the average of daily maximum temperatures in this particular case. And I'm just looking at the improvement in that. Same thing with rainfall. Same thing with index compared to the previous vintage. And also difference in barrel tasting scores as an improvement. So my model looks like this. These are the specific definitions of those 4 variables. I'm multiplying rain as with -1 because less rain is better, so I'm using only the improvement part of it. So here are the results. So we tested with many different variables. I can only fit that many here, including square terms and positive squares, negative squares, and all that. First thing, all 4 are significant. Temperature, rain, score, and index. At 1%, they are all significant. R square improves quite a bit. But the best one that we have is what we call Model 9 here. It is using, in addition to those 4, just the interaction term between temperature and market index. Okay? So practically, I have those 5 variables with an adjusted R square of 73%. And except rain, everything is significant at 1%. Rain is significant at 10%. So here's the fit between the actual prices on the horizontal axis and what we predicted by using this model over the years, around 573 data points here. We capture 94% of the slope on the y equals x line, and also R square is close to 90%. Liv-ex has been putting out some reports using this. They are trying to actually push this kind of approach to their users as well. So there have been several reports that were posted and released by them, including last week one of them. They call these more of the realistic Unprimeur prices because of the fact that we're actually looking at pretty granular temperature and all that information. Now, one thing that they are interested in is that what is the realistic price for these 2017 vintage wines. So if you look at it, this is what you see. From the sample, I have only 38. Petit Mouton was not given a score, so that's why we are missing that. But this is the information that I have for those wines for the 2017 and how much it will differ from 2016. So on average, we see around 8% or 8 to 9% reduction compared to 2016. And this is our predictions. Obviously, the numbers will be different for some of those, and as they release them, we see the impact of those. Why is that so important? Well, first of all, winemakers want to make good decisions. And in fact, if there is anything that I learned out of all of this, is that I always hear these winemakers are making some ad hoc decisions. They just throw out some number to milk the market. That's the comment that I often hear. But there is apparently some science to it, right? So what I see here is they are not some dumb decisions. I can explain them using weather, particularly temperatures and rain, index movements, as well as barrel scores. So they are not that bad. So my hat's off to these winemakers in that sense. So definitely I believe that they are actually quite informed, and these 4 variables are good in terms of explaining that. And that's also good for buyers who want to plan their budgets accordingly and make their purchasing decisions in a much more informed way, especially when they are budgeting some of the money for futures and some of the money for bottles. So, so that's the case. And for the market, it's good because it's likely to increase the trade of these futures and so on. So that's pretty much it. So I hope I was on time.